All right, guys, what is going on? Back here for another episode on the Conquer Athlete YouTube channel. In this one, I'm gonna quickly talk about periodization model for mixed modal athletes. And I say quickly because for those of you that have experience and have done work with different periodization models, you understand this. You understand that it's a very lengthy, in-depth topic and one that can be a lot and is a lot longer than this 10-minute talk that I'm going to do. But I guess you could say that's every topic that I've been speaking about, right? What I'm trying to do is give you kind of like some good nuggets that you can utilize without overdoing it. And then obviously this is something that you have complete interest in. You can keep diving down into it. So when you think about like programming for mixed modal athletes, it's not just about putting a bunch of stuff together, right? You have to look at the sport and say, well, for instance, CrossFit, it's constantly varied. So I need to constantly vary everything. And that's kind of like the premise of where CrossFit started, right? The ability to do everything well, right? And repeat that. But that's not programming. And when CrossFit became more competitive in the sport and it became more of a competition focus and people started diving into the mixed modal side of it more, then the application of periodization models became a lot more important than what people were doing, right? So in the early days of CrossFit, you didn't see any of this. Back in like 2008, it was just a free-for-all of just putting whatever together daily and seeing how it goes. And it kept getting refined and refined and refined as anything does when it starts off new and continually grows, right? So we understand that real programming has direction, right? Real programming has progression, and real programming understands what qualities need to be built, what qualities need to be maintained, and how to organize stress over time so that the athlete can actually adapt, right? And that's where periodization comes in. Periodization is not just a fancy word for training blocks. It's essentially the organization of training stress over time with a specific goal in mind. And when you think about that, that sums up every principle of a periodization model, right? And for mixed modal athletes, this becomes even more important because we're not training one quality, right? We're training many. We're training strength, power, aerobic capacity, gymnastics, muscular endurance, barbell cycling, pacing, repeatability, recovery. We have all these things going on, right? So in this video, I want to talk about what, why, and how behind periodization models for mixed modal athletes to give you a better understanding of how to put all that stuff together. So what is periodization, right? Periodization is simply the planned organization of training. It answers a few important questions. What are we trying to build? Why are we trying to build it? When are we trying to build it? How much stress can the athlete handle? What needs to be emphasized right now? What needs to be maintained? How does this block of training set up for the next one? And that's very important. That last question is something a lot of mixed modal programmers miss. The question is huge because a good program is not just what happens today. It's about what today allows us to do tomorrow, next week, next month, and deeper into the season. For a mixed modal athlete, periodization gives structure to the sport that can otherwise become chaotic. The sport might look random on the surface, but the preparation cannot be random. That's very important to keep in mind. The preparation has to be intentional, right? So the reason periodization matters so much in mixed modal sports is because mixed modal athletes have competing demands. You need to be strong, but not so beat up from strength work that you cannot develop your engine. Right? You need to build your aerobic system, but not create so much endurance volume that you interfere with strength and power development. You need skill work, but skill work under fatigue is different than skill work in a fresh state, right? You need intensity, but you cannot live at intensity all year. We talk about this stuff all the time. You have to maintain everything, right? Strength, metabolic conditioning, high volume gymnastics, long engine work, max effort intervals. If you do that at such a high output, every week is going to look like a test week, right? And the issue is that when everything is important, nothing is truly developed. The athlete may survive the training, but not getting the adaptation that they actually need. Periodization is what allows us to organize the year so that we can build qualities in the right order, dose intensity appropriately, manage fatigue, and bring the athlete toward competition in a prepared state. And that's the main goal, right? So there's lots of periodization models out there, but let's talk about a couple of the big ones. We have linear periodization, block periodization, undulating periodization, conjugate or concurrent training. There's vertical integration. Like these are some of the big ones that a lot of people are going to talk about. We talk about a lot more of these inside of the Conquer Athlete Coaching Development course. The reality is, guys, is like everybody's going to do a bit of a blend of them all, right? Inside of mixed modal sport, no one's going to really like run one all the time. There's always going to be some level of a blend between different models based off that programmer or coach's kind of biases, right? Or hopefully what the athlete biases. Now, let's talk about these a little bit. So let's talk about the big ones. Linear periodization is probably the most traditional model, right? This is where training progresses from higher volume and lower intensity toward lower volume and higher intensity over time. So a simple example would be, an early block, more volume, more controlled work, more gen prep. Middle block would be heavier loading, more specific strength work, more threshold work, and then later block would be higher intensity, more sport-specific pieces, more competition-style workouts. For a mixed-modal athlete, I don't think that pure linear periodization is enough by itself because the sport requires you to maintain multiple qualities year-round, right? You cannot just kind of spend 3 months only building strength and then sort of forget about it, right? So now let's move on to the next one, block periodization. Block periodization is where we organize training into concentrated blocks with a specific emphasis. For example, you might have a hypertrophy or tissue capacity block, a strength block, a power block, a threshold block, a competition specific block. The benefit to block periodization is that it gives clarity. The athlete knows what that main focus is. The coach knows what the main adaptation is, and the program has a clear direction. But there is a problem in mixed modal sports, right? If you completely isolate qualities, you can lose other abilities that matter, right? If you spend 8 weeks only pushing strength, your engine may drop depending upon the type of person that you are. You spend 8 weeks only pushing aerobic work, your high-end power and gymnastics sharpening skills may suffer, right? So block periodization works well for mixed modal athletes when a block is a primary emphasis, but the program still maintains the qualities the sport requires. And that's why I said in the beginning, you're going to see that lots of periodization models that people utilize are blends because of the demand of a mixed modal sport. Now, undulating periodization changes the emphasis more frequently. This may happen week to week or even day to day, right? For example, within a training week, you may have Monday as a strength emphasis, Tuesday as aerobic development, Wednesday as a skill and threshold piece, Thursday as a recovery or low intensity volume, Friday as a power mixed modal intensity, Saturday is longer sport specific piece. This model fits mixed modal sports very well because the sport requires exposure to multiple qualities, right? The advantage is that you can keep more qualities alive within inside the week. The challenge is that it becomes random if the coach does not understand the purpose behind each day. Doesn't mean random. It means we are intentionally rotating stress, right? So at Conquer, this is what we are constantly asking. What are the primary training effect of the day? What is the secondary effect? What is the cost of the session? How does it impact tomorrow? How does it fit into the week, right? Like for mixed modal athletes, I do like undulating models because they let us distribute stress, right? But we have to make sure that we're able to manage fatigue and be disciplined in what we're doing, right? And then we also have conjugate or concurrent training, right? Concurrent training is really the foundation of mixed modal sports. The athlete needs to train strength and endurance qualities in the same training cycle. You're going to see lots of people kind of blend their training into this one over time, right? Because that's the sport. The question is not whether we should train multiple qualities. The question is, how do we organize them? And do they fit right within inside that session, right? We're managing fatigue and stress. We have to make sure we're understanding the interference effect because that does matter, right? Endurance work can interfere with strength and power development if it's dosed poorly, placed poorly, or performed with too much fatigue, right? Strength work can interfere with conditioning if the athlete is too sore or too neurologically drained. So concurrent training requires decision-making, right? If the priority is strength, I may not put heavy strength early in the session or early in the day. If the priority is aerobic development, I may separate that from heavy lifting or keep it low intensity enough that it does not create unnecessary fatigue. If we are doing 2 sessions in a day, I may separate strength and endurance by several hours, ideally. If we're combining them in one session, I need to understand which quality is driving that session and which quality is supporting it, right? And that's where a lot of mixed modal programming goes wrong, right? Because we might write things in a certain way, but it all interferes with one another, and then it's like too much, and the person can't adapt, and one pulls from the other, right? The goal is not to train everything equally hard. The goal is to dose each quality in a way that creates adaptation without burying the athlete. And we also have vertical integration, right? And this is one of the models that I think fits mixed modal athletes really well. The idea is that multiple qualities are trained throughout the year, but the emphasis shifts depending upon the phase. So strength, aerobic capacity, skill, power, mixed modal work will all be present, but they're not all pushed equally at the same time, right? This is how I like to think about programming for CrossFit and mixed modal athletes because the sport requires broad ability and broad adaptability, but we cannot let major qualities disappear. We cannot push everything hard all at once. So in an early phase, we might emphasize, aerobic base, structural strength, strict gymnastics, movement quality, tissue tolerance. Then we maintain intensity with small touches. In the next phase, we may emphasize absolute strength, threshold development, skill, volume, power, strength, endurance, repeatability, but we maintain aerobic work and structural accessories. And then later, we emphasize mixed modal intensity, competition style intervals, skill and fatigue, repeatability, transitions, pacing, and we try to maintain strength with lower volume but higher intent, right? And this is the premise behind vertical integration, where everything exists, but the volume intensity of each quality change based on the goal of the phase. This model respects the complexity of the sport while still giving the program direction. Like, how do I apply this like across the training year, right? Let's bring this into the practical side. If I'm working with a mixed modal athlete, I'm looking at the year in phases. The exact layout depends on the athlete, the competition calendar, their training age, their strengths, their limiters, and their recovery capacity. But generally, I think about it like this. Phase 1 is foundation and a rebuild phase. Phase 2 is going to be a developmental phase. Phase 3 is specific preparation phase. Phase 4 is a competition phase. And how do I choose the right model? So the mistake is thinking that you can pick one model forever, right? You can't, you don't. Good coaching is not about being married to one periodization model. Good coaching is about understanding what the athlete needs and choosing the right tool. If the athlete lacks basic strength and tissue tolerance, I may weigh heavily on more of a block style emphasis. If the athlete needs to maintain multiple qualities while progressing towards competition, I may use more of a concurrent or vertical integration model. If the athlete is in the middle of a season and needs to touch many systems without overloading one, I may lean in towards an undulating structure, right? If the athlete is advanced, I'm almost always using some form of concurrent training because they need multiple qualities present at that time, right? And that's something to keep in mind. The models serve the athlete. The athlete does not serve the models. The models serve the athlete does not serve the model. Like, that is key. So what do you need to remember, right? When you're programming for mixed modal athletes, periodization has to answer 5 major questions. What quality are we building? What quality are we maintaining? What are the athlete's limiters? What's the cost of training? How does this phase set up the next phase? When we can think about those things, we can have a better understanding of how we're going to put these periodization models into effect to drive success for the athlete. Because at the end of the day, mixed modal athletes is not about making the program look complicated. It's the opposite. We need to make it look easy and have it be effective. It's about making the program make sense. The sport is complex. The preparation has to be organized. You need to know when to build, when to maintain, when to push, when to pull back, and when to let the athlete express. The best mixed modal programs are not random. They are just hard. They are structured. They have progression. They manage fatigue. They respect the interference effect and develop the athlete in phases. And most importantly, they meet the athlete where they are. That's the difference between writing workouts and building programs. And that's what periodization should be. It should give direction to the chaos. It should create adaptation. And it should put the athlete in a position to perform when it matters most. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you want to get more information about this and you love diving into this, check out the Conquer Athlete Coaching Development course. We go in way more depth with this type of periodization for mixed modal athletes. I'll see you guys on the next one.